everybody, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hayden Lee, and I'm joined today by a good friend of mine, owner-operator of an awesome local supermarket here in town, McKay Kesler. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Hayden. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. Every small town, I was talking to a coworker here just a few minutes ago. Every small town has a small like supermarket. I feel like, regardless of what town you drive into, every town's got a market similar to Kesler's. It's Kesler's Market. And I always love going into them and checking them out. And it's one of my favorite things about living where I do is, I can know like your cashiers on a first name basis. It's something that I love. And I think the story of Kesler's is really, really cool for a lot of reasons. And what the future looks like for Kesler's is really interesting due to a lot of things going on in the world, especially the last couple of years. So I kind of want to just start at the beginning. What was the start of Kesler's? How did it all begin? And kind of how you got involved originally with the family business?
Okay, yeah. Well, it started a long time ago.
Long before you.
Way before me.
Gotcha.
So I didn't really have a choice growing up in the grocery business. It started back in 1934, coming right out of the Depression.
Yeah.
My great-grandfather, F.C. Kesler,
okay,
he lived out in Marquee. He was a rancher and was not being successful out there. He came rolling through town to sell some hogs and saw this little house on Bridge Street, just a little ways down the road from here. And he thought that would be a good place for a grocery store. So he stopped and he put a deposit of $5 down on the land, went and sold some hogs and came back and bought the property. Wow. And he had a lot of backlash when he started telling people, hey, I'm going to put a grocery store here just attached to this little house. They said, you're not going to make it in that location. No way. But, the times, Depression time, the outcome didn't look good. But he did it, and they went out and built a 16 by 20 grocery store on the front of this house. So that's not very big if you think about it, 16 by 20. My grandpa was about 10 or 11 years old at that time. And he remembers the first day earnings being $11. So that's going a ways back too. That's not very much money for a day's work, but let's see. Through the years, it just kept growing. Every time they would kind of grow out of it, they'd have to add on. So it became a fairly large store right there in that location. But when FC turned it over to my grandfather, Jack, in the I want to say 56 is when they built the store on 925 West Bridge.
Gotcha. And
that's where he took the idea of little mom and pop store to supermarket size. And he thought it's got to be on the edge of town so that it can capture the highway. The freeway wasn't even there yet.
No.
So the landscape looked way different back in the 50s. So Blackfoot has grown a lot around our grocery store, and so we're kind of in the heart, I feel like.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's interesting that you say the edge of town, because for those that aren't from Blackfoot that are listening, it feels like it's right in the middle of town now, which is awesome for you guys now. But at the time, he built it on the edge of town, hoping to capture some of that highway traffic or whatever. And it's funny that was his strategy, and now it's almost not the opposite, but it really is kind of in the heart of town. That intersection there is kind of the central part of town. Yeah,
and location has been a big play in our success too. Right on that little bend, so it gets a lot of visual, a lot of traffic. So it's a good location. We couldn't really ask for better.
Right.
So, but the downside to that location is the size. It is small, so we cannot expand at all. We're stuck to that footprint. But that's what we maximize on is that footprint. We just do the best with what we have.
That's really cool.
So through the years from the 50s, that store being built, it's been added on to a little bit and changed a lot. We added the garden center, which is kind of the lifeblood of the grocery store because of the products that we are able to have through the garden center. It's another aspect of Kesler's that is our niche. Something that differentiates us from other grocery stores is that garden center. Moving on, come I into the world in the early 90s. I did not want to grow up in the grocery business. I thought it was kind of silly. I was never forced to work, but I can't say that I loved it. People would ask me all the time, "Are you going to take this over someday?" And I'd say, "I'd like to own it, but I don't want to work there." That doesn't work. That does not work.
It's not in small town business like that.
No. You've got to put your best foot forward and get to work. We're in the trenches of the battlefield, the retail battlefield, and but as I've spent more time there, I love it. It is fun, entertaining to watch customers sometimes.
I believe it.
It's a very good business to be in. And there's actually a really good camaraderie with other retailers, other grocery stores in the surrounding Idaho, Utah area. If we have questions, we can go to other retailers, and we've got a really good kind of a brotherhood.
That's really cool.
That's a good thing.
Over the years, you mentioned briefly the garden center now being like a huge part of what you guys do, and that was, I mean, I don't want to call it an afterthought, but it was something that you thought, it might add some revenue, but didn't necessarily think it was going to be a big deal. I think that's relatable to, I'm looking big picture, thinking of like my clients and other people that adding a service that you didn't necessarily think would blow up the way that it did. How have you pivoted into becoming a really good garden center? Was there a specific moment or something that you guys did that you felt really helped that be successful, offering that, additional service?
Mm-hmm. Well, all attributes or all the glory goes to Kelly.
Okay.
My Uncle Kelly, he had an interest in gardening, and he went and got a little education in horticulture. I can't say exactly what his education was, but he had an interest and he just started it. He did it. Started small, and then it just grew and grew because of his love for that and his interest in that. Another aspect with gardens, you mentioned adding something we didn't know what the outcome was going to be, kind of going out on a limb. Garden center was one, but adding the sushi to our grocery store was something I did not see coming. Yeah. I heard of grocery stores adding that, and I thought that I can't see that. Yeah. But that was because I had never tried sushi. I didn't know what it was really. But once we took that risk of adding sushi, I cannot believe how many people in Blackfoot eat sushi and absolutely love it.
Yeah, totally.
And keep coming back for it. So that was a good move.
Is there a particular mindset? Again, I always think big picture. People that are listening to this that have started a business or thinking about starting a business. You mentioned that the sushi thing, and I think that might be an analogy in and of itself. But is it just being open to those new ideas? I guess, was there someone that came to you and was like, we should try this? Is there a specific mindset that it takes to make something like that successful, I guess, for you? I want to dive a little bit deeper on that.
Yeah, I wish I could say it was my idea. But yeah, I was approached by the company, Fresh Sushi.
Okay.
They add themselves to grocery stores. It's their way of not having to buy their own store.
Right.
They just are given some space. So it works out good for them, and it works out good for us because we just get a percentage of the sales. So yeah, they approached us. Hey, this is the idea. And I told them no. And then they came back another year. And then I just thought, they talked numbers a little bit. And then I started seeing, hey, this could possibly be something right here in Blackfoot. We don't have anything like it.
Yeah.
Let's just give it a shot. And it was really hard to give them the space, because I told you our space is small, but we sacrificed some cooler space, some freezer space, some dry space, kitchen space, but it's paid off.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think that's an interesting conversation, I think, for anybody that is looking to start a business or already has one, that always be looking for ways to innovate and try new things, right? Like don't be afraid to take a step, take a leap, and try something different, even within your own business. I mean, it's a huge leap to start a business, right? Like for your great-grandfather to like, I'm gonna put a deposit on this house, and for the idea for a grocery store, right? Like something like that. Like that's a huge leap in and of itself. But innovating and changing along the way, and adding the garden center and adding, that sushi section, like having the willingness to make those extra steps to just make your business a little bit better is hugely important. You can never really be satisfied. I feel like you always got to have like a hunger for trying to be better, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. You're now I guess this would be you're the fourth generation.
Yep. Fourth generation.
With this grocery store. A lot of businesses in the world, that's how a lot of people end up owning businesses. Sometimes small, sometimes large, that their parents owned it, or their grandparents, or whoever, and it gets passed down, or they're able to buy into the business some way. How do you balance, especially a name that's so well known locally? Kesler's Market is a super well known name in our neck of the woods. How do you balance the legacy of trying to maintain that good name and that good business, but also try to innovate and be better into the future and balance what the future looks like? How do you balance those two?
It is kind of a challenge, because our store grew on certain characteristics, certain things that we've done good all through the years. I think the best thing is keeping it simple. My grandpa, I learned from him a lot of his strategies, and it was kind of make it up as you go.
Yeah. Honestly.
But you've got to innovate a little bit and add to the old. Modernizing is really important in our store, because things get old. Our building is now 50 years old plus, and it's time to innovate and get better. In 2010, we did a facelift and remodeled the front of the store, which was a great thing. So the outside looks really good, but there's things on the inside, kind of the guts of the store, that really need some help. And we've been chipping away at that little by little. So physically, we're doing a few little things, but some of the ways that we do business have got to improve as well. And I'm seeing some of the little things that we've got to improve on. For instance, moving over to the digital way of shopping. Yeah. So we have added online shopping, pickup or delivery, like most grocery stores you see now have that. Right. We jumped on pre-COVID to that. So that was kind of a blessing, because we were all set up ready for that come COVID time. People wanting to stay home. But that was a challenge in itself.
Well, and I think of, because I follow your business on Facebook, but an analogy of what kind of we're talking about in and of itself was when you guys wanted to change your marquee to a digital marquee. There was like, I don't want to call it uproar, but there were people. Oh, yeah. You would call it uproar.
Yeah, I would call it uproar.
There were people that were like, do not change that marquee. Yeah. I remember seeing stuff on the internet about it. And you guys, I feel like a good lesson with that. And again, people that aren't necessarily in the grocery business, but be willing to compromise. Like honor your legacy, but also acknowledge that you've got to be willing to grow and innovate. And you guys did a great job of that. You kept the old marquee. and you just added a new digital one on kind of the other edge of your property, and it works out great. And you have kind of the old and the new, and I think that's a great, almost a metaphor or analogy of kind of what you're talking about is you can do both.
Yeah.
You can honor the old and innovate and be better and bring in the new.
Yep.
And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. Retrofit is the word I like to use. We have this old building and old ways of doing things, but when we can bring something new and retrofit it into what we're doing, mold it into our business, it works out.
You mentioned you notice little things that you're like, we should be doing that better. Me, I always try and get into the mind of a business owner, an entrepreneur. How do you notice those little things, I guess? Because like you said, you like grocery business wasn't necessarily something you always wanted to do, but eventually kind of fell in love with it. Mm-hmm. How did you start? Was there a specific point that you remember you started noticing, okay, we can improve on that. We can be better at this. How does a business owner or an entrepreneur, how does someone do that?
Well, for me, it was working under my dad and my grandpa. I just would pay attention to the way that they did things. And I don't know if it was just naturally coming out of my mind.
Yeah.
But I just thought, this could be a little bit better. And if I can think of an example, I'll take the schedule, for instance, our weekly schedule for our employees. My grandpa would handwrite the schedule every week, and it looked kind of like junk, in pencil, and then he would make copies. And so I just felt like it could be better. Yeah. So I took it and put it on the computer and digitalized it, I guess you could say, and helped him switch over to that. And then it became my responsibility. But that was, a very small example of just converting one not so good process to a little bit better process. Let's see if I can think of another example along those same lines. I kind of did a lot of little things like that.
Yeah. Converting
things to the computer, because I saw that transition from no computer in the business to using a computer.
Yeah.
So technology has definitely improved the day-to-day and helped with the overall efficiency of business.
It worked out nicely, I guess, that you kind of built into you starting this business. You had some great mentors, your dad, your uncle, your grandfather. For people that are out there looking for a mentor that might not be in the same situation, they might not have had a parent that could kind of maybe guide them a little bit. What are some things that you feel like people should look for in a mentor when it comes to starting a business?
Definitely somebody they trust.
Yeah.
If they see somebody that is being successful, watch them.
Okay.
Watch their every move and kind of, I don't know how close you have to watch though. I guess for me, my mentors were pretty close, so it was easy for me to pay attention to them. But, for somebody that doesn't have that mentor already, I guess really just be watching for that. Yeah. That somebody that they trust and they see them being successful and find out what they do. On that note too, is if you see somebody that is successful, but maybe the trust isn't there because maybe you see them doing things that aren't quite what you want.
Yeah.
Just pull those good things, watch what's being successful. But for me in the grocery business, retail, working with customers, honesty is the best policy. We have to be honest with our customers, honest with our employees. And I feel like watching my mentors, my grandpa and my dad and uncle, they were so honest. I never saw them lie to customers. I never saw them jack prices up high or more than what we always mark things up. They were very honest in their dealings. And that was something that has resonated with me, and I'm trying very hard to follow their example. So the mentor's got to be somebody you trust and like the way that they do things.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know, your dad personally, but I can imagine if he's anything like you, that's hugely important. Honesty and being willing to, honesty and integrity. And I feel like people sometimes, they mean similar things, I guess, but integrity really is doing the things, doing the honest things when people aren't looking. Things like not jacking up prices, because, I don't know what a gallon of milk costs when you guys purchase it, but I know what it costs when I go in, and I know, because I know you, that I can trust that McKay's not going to jack up that price of that service or that good, because I know he's a good person. And it's hugely important with, finding your mentors, but really just how you run your business, because your customers are going to find out. I feel like your customers are going to know if you're not doing something honestly. And it's hugely important to try and be as transparent and as honest as possible. It's how I try to operate my daily life when I'm working with my clients with marketing. I try and be as honest and upfront as possible. I had a client a couple months ago. I was filling in for someone that was out of the office. I was filling in, and it's not even one of my clients. It's one of her clients. And they were having an issue with their website and how a certain thing was going on with their website. And there had been some problems. And I straight up told him, I was like, this is incorrect and we should have been better. This is something we should be doing better. And he was like, wow, that's really awesome of you to say. I think most of the time our clients and our customers can see through the BS, for lack of a better term, right? And if you're just willing to be honest and say, hey, we should have been better, we need to be better, and we're going to be better going forward, people are going to appreciate that. They're like, hey, it's okay that you messed up. We're willing to continue to work with you because you're honest about it. And it's hugely important.
That was one thing I learned young and being a manager is you've got to be the first one to be able to accept being wrong and admit, I was wrong. That's a good sign of a manager. Yeah,
totally. And like you mentioned, when you first got into this business, you wanted to just be an owner and not be there on the front lines, but you've been willing to jump in on the front lines and help. And, I've seen you at your store at 7 a.m. in the morning, like you're there unlocking and getting things ready in the morning and doing stuff like that. One of my mentors, my greatest mentors growing up, was a guy named Neil Hillman, who lives here locally and was one of my first employers. And one of the first jobs that I had was moving irrigation pipe. And it was hard and brutal work. And, during the summers, it was 6 days a week, early mornings, 5 a.m., we'd be moving irrigation pipe. And Neil is quite a bit older than me. If he listened to this, he would be laughing. But he's quite a bit older than me. And, I'd be moving pipe in a field, and I would look, quarter mile away in the next field, and Neil would be out there moving pipe and doing the same thing I was doing. He never asked me to do something that he himself wasn't willing to do. And I think that's hugely important. Anybody in leadership positions or management positions, if you're not willing to do something that you're asking your employees to do, your employees, kind of going back to the integrity and honesty thing, are going to see right through that. And they're going to know, hey, this guy is asking me to do stuff that he wouldn't do, so why should I do it? And it's not good for business.
Yep, absolutely.
You mentioned it kind of briefly when you were talking about the online pickup and ordering thing. COVID has been a big thing on everybody's mind, the pandemic over the last couple of years. How, grocery stores, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, stuff was getting wiped out off the shelves and people were panic buying, and it was a huge issue. How did you guys overcome a lot of those issues during the pandemic? And going forward with, things we hear like supply chain issues, how are you going to face that, I guess, going forward?
Yeah, that was a really interesting time right at the beginning. Everybody knows exactly what they were doing and kind of like what was going on when things really went haywire. But I remember walking into my store and people were just everywhere. The place was loaded with people. I thought, this is exciting. What is going on? This is great. But then I started really hearing why. And then I started thinking, what is this going to do? So our store got wiped out pretty good. You know, there were a lot of empty shelves,
Yeah.
needless to say. So my first thought was, how are we going to refill this? Because I knew that our wholesaler out of Salt Lake City, Associated Foods, if all the grocery stores in our whole area are having this problem, you know, what's it going to take to refill these shelves?
Right.
And that was the scariest part, because when we'd get a truck, I felt like people were kind of watching us like, are they going to come raid my truck as I unload this? It was kind of an eerie feeling at the time. But to overcome those, we just kind of had to roll with the punches, because things were out of stock. We just had to take the time to get things back on the shelf. Luckily, most of our customers were pretty understanding. And I think in this area that we live, I don't know, people were pretty calm about it for the most part. We didn't see people getting really angry at our store. I can't say that for every grocery store. I think there were some big issues at some local markets, but ours comes down to our clientele, very calm and very gracious, and so it was a good time for us. But scary at the same time, because we didn't know what was right and what was wrong.
Right.
Because everybody was trying to figure out things to do.
Yeah. Are we supposed to wear masks? Are we not? Can we go outside? Can we not?
Yeah. Can we touch this? Can we touch you?
Yeah.
You know, stay away 6 feet, please. That was pretty rough. We tried to think ahead of you know, what would customers expect. So we immediately started cleaning everything like crazy, and allowing customers to see us cleaning so that they felt comfortable coming in our store. I think that was a big thing, was comfort. We wanted people to feel comfortable.
That's awesome.
What else about COVID?
Well, going forward, like we hear a lot about like supply chain issues. Is there certain things that you're preparing for? Like, how do you prepare for those issues going forward?
Yeah, it all depends on the day and the item, but
Okay.
we're still seeing a lot of shortages on things. Right now, for instance, distilled water, pastas, those are some commodities that we have not seen much of.
Right.
Little spotty pieces of pasta and no distilled water, which makes me feel bad, because there's a lot of people that need that distilled water for some medical reasons and different things. So trying to look ahead, I'm looking into buying my own distiller.
Oh, wow.
Which I would be able to create my own distilled water.
Yeah.
But even those, I've looked into it, they're about 4 months out.
Wow.
So trying to get ahead of that is kind of rough.
Yeah, totally.
Because you get hit with the problem immediate, but the fix isn't always immediate.
Yeah. Are there some creative solutions that you've had to find along the way? Like, I'm sure you're partnered up with certain suppliers, but have you had to reach out to other suppliers? I guess, is there things that you've been able to do?
Yeah, for the most part, we get our groceries from Associated Foods out of Salt Lake.
Yeah.
They're our wholesaler, and they've done a fantastic job of finding the product for us.
Gotcha.
When we can't find a product, they'll go to work trying to find a replacement.
Oh, that's cool.
And for the most part, they've been able to find those and get them in our stores. But that's not foolproof. There's a lot of work that goes into getting that product on the shelf. So we have to kind of go out and find those things ourselves. Let's see if I can think of... Well, nothing's coming to mind exactly of certain items that I've had to go out and find on my own, but what we have available is huge. We have a whole bunch of SKUs available, thousands of them, and our store only carries a very small amount of those. So when we find something when we have something we can't find, we can look at some of those other SKUs that...
Something similar.
Yeah, and we can find that. And for the most part, we've been able to do that.
That's awesome.
There's just some categories that are hit so hard that it covers the entire category that you can't find certain things.
Staying on the subject of the pandemic, obviously you guys are hyper local. A lot of people during the pandemic were able to work from home, work remote, and that's not something that a grocery store can do.
Right.
What were you able to do, I guess, hiring wise? How were you able to overcome that hiring challenge during COVID? And how do you, I guess, how do you overcome that really?
Okay. Well, the first year of the pandemic, 2020, was really nice. We hardly had any turnover. Most of our employees stuck with us. I feel like that was really simple. Coming into 2021, the atmosphere changed a little bit, and it did start to become harder and harder to find good people. And there were periods where we were really shorthanded because people just weren't coming to our door.
Yeah.
In the past, I haven't had to advertise for jobs. People just come.
Yeah.
And I'll have a job and I'll have applications, and it's easy. But 2021 came and applications weren't there, but I had positions. So I had to advertise a little bit, which for me, I just didn't know what I was doing. So I failed a few times, put up ads, and nothing came of them. It's actually starting to look a little better for me. I think more of the youth are coming out.
Cool.
I'm having more high school kids come back for jobs than I used to have, and so we're utilizing them a little bit more than we have in the last few years. So that's been kind of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Changing the look and atmosphere. My son is now working. He's 16. So that's kind of fun too.
Yeah.
Having more family involved again.
Was there a particular thing, you mentioned the first year you were able to retain a lot of your employees, and I know people that have worked there for a long time. How do you retain those good employees? And you even mentioned you have even high school kids are coming back and working for you after, a semester or whatever back at school. How do you retain those good employees?
It's our atmosphere.
Okay.
Honestly, for us, it's not pay. We have a hard time paying high prices. We can't compete with McDonald's.
Right.
That pays an initial minimum wage that's pretty high.
Right.
So we can't win employees by our wage, but it's just our atmosphere. Good people. You're surrounded by good people. We're good to our employees. Again, honest comes into there, so they feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Their expectations are laid out, and it's just important that they feel good about their job and they enjoy their job, and kind of it becomes a passion for them. For instance, one lady has worked for us for over 30 years, and she's at that age that she needed to be done, and so she retired essentially. Yeah. And she left, and she's actually coming back. She's missed us, and she's coming back on a very reduced amount of hours, but it's so good to have her back.
Yeah.
In our meat department, and how wonderful that is. So it really comes down to the environment. She missed it, and kind of needs that back. And she saw a need. We needed somebody in the meat department, and so she's filling a need as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think you mentioned something there that I think is super important, and I think it's important across all aspects of owning a business, operating a business, whatever it might be, establishing expectations. And you do that with your employees, so they understand where they're coming from, and they understand. Yeah, they understand where you're coming from, and you understand where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. Establishing expectations is hugely important. I had a meeting today with a couple of coworkers, and we were talking about this very thing, and establishing your expectations with your coworkers, your clients, helps everybody be on the same page so that there's no confusion about what is going to be accomplished here. This is what we're going to do for you. This is what you're going to do for us, and everybody knows. Because you can get into the weeds if expectations aren't specifically lined out. You can get down the road and people are frustrated. They're mad because, you said I was going to be a cashier and now I'm doing something else, or you said I was going to be stocking. if you don't establish what maybe their job description is, or you don't establish, for people that aren't in this industry, you don't establish what your service is that you're providing to this customer, there's going to be confusion and there's going to be hurt feelings, and you're going to lose people. And ultimately, like I've had the most success with my relationships with other people if I establish, this is what I'm going to do, this is what you're going to do, we're all happy, that's great. And it just seems like that's hugely, hugely important.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate your insights. I think you've given some really cool things to think about, both with your business and I think just relating it to personal life. I find your story and Kesler's story super fascinating. I always close every podcast asking three questions. So I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. Not that I haven't for the last half hour, I guess, but, so the first one I always ask, favorite book or podcast that you're reading or listening to right now?
So a book, I'm not currently reading anything, but I have read some good books.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't even remember the title of the one that I really like.
I'm sure we can find it.
Yeah. But I think this is considered a podcast. Our wholesaler, Associated Foods, they've started something called On Break.
Okay.
And it's similar to this.
Yeah.
They interview other retailers in the grocery business.
That's cool.
And they talk about the COVID-19. They talk about the supply chain. They talk about some of the services that are associated. And so they're topics that are relevant to our industry.
Yeah.
And so that I've found those really interesting.
Totally.
And they're comical and they're fun. They talk about food.
Yeah.
So that's a really good thing.
That's awesome.
So it is things like that can actually generate ideas for me, which is really helpful.
There's a million different podcasts, and there's so much content out there on the internet if you can find it. Mm-hmm. There was a stat somewhere I read, and I don't want to misquote it, but something like every minute on YouTube, every minute there are 4 hours of content uploaded to YouTube.
Wow.
Something crazy. Like I think it's some number like that. There is stuff out there for everybody, and there's stuff out there for every industry. So yeah, I mean, go find, whether it's a book or a podcast or some videos on the internet, like find something that relates to you and what you want to do, and you're going to find some help. Hopefully this podcast helps people. I hope people can find this podcast and find some stuff that we talk about relatable.
Yeah. The hardest part is probably taking the time
to find good stuff.
To find that good stuff and taking the time to listen.
100%.
Yep.
Second question. I think I might know what one of your answers is, what one of your answers will be, but I'm going to let you talk about it. How do you relax or recharge at the end of the day?
I have to go home and play with the kids.
That's a good one.
If it's summertime, I'm out water skiing.
Yes, I
Did you
knew
get it?
That was the one I was going to say. McKay, for those of you who don't know, is an amazing water skier.
Yep, I find passion in that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's not just dinking behind the boat. It's carving the wake and going around the buoys, and it's very fast, very exhilarating.
That's awesome. That's a great way to recharge. Just take your mind off of the everyday.
But I actually don't do that at the end of the day. I usually go on lunch.
Oh, there you go. That's perfect.
And then I come back to work.
There you go. It's a good midday recharge.
Yep.
And sometimes you need those.
Yep.
Shut your brain off for a little while. That's awesome. Last question. Ask everybody. You've been, working in and around Kesler's and doing that for 20 plus years now.
Yep. Closer to 30.
Yeah. So you've been doing this for a while. Mm-hmm. If you could rewind it all to either, first starting to work with Kesler's and your dad, or even just rewinding to when you officially took over the business, if you could rewind and tell younger McKay one thing, what would it be?
I would rewind back to college. I stopped going to college, and I would probably tell myself, keep going. Push through and do some more courses that would help me on the business end. Yeah. Because that's where I found struggling is knowing how to run the business. I'm making it up as I go.
Well, you've done a good job.
Yeah. I was working 40 plus hours a week, and I went to my grandpa and said, I'm struggling in my classes. And he gave me the advice of, well, just quit.
Well, you've made it work.
Yep.
But I think that is great advice. I multiple times got at some point in my degree that I was like, I'm done. I need to be done. And decided to push through, and I'm grateful for it. As frustrating and as time consuming as it was, definitely grateful for it.
Yep. Entrepreneurship and business owning, it can be done without an education, but it probably makes it a lot tougher. Yeah. So education is very important.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, McKay. I think you've given some great insights. Where can people find out more about Kesler's? I know you guys have a Facebook page.
Yeah, Facebook could be better there. We could put some more effort and heart to that. But KeslersMarket.com. We do a texting blast.
That's awesome.
That you can just find out when things are going on sale and certain things. Just come and visit us.
Awesome. Well, thanks, McKay. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Hayden.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Subscribe on any major podcast platform or check out our website at successonpoint.com.